All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We're right on the dot here at 5:30. Thank you guys for coming in and holding out here on a late Thursday afternoon, last session of the day before the party begins. So really appreciate you guys here. Quick introductions. My name is Sri Ilaprolu. I lead our solutions architecture practice, and we cover and work with customers in the higher ed space, K-12, as well as education technology companies. So primarily concentrating on education as a vertical. Along with me, I have two of our esteemed colleagues and customers here, Mindy and Chris, representing University of Michigan, and then Chris representing Caltech. So we'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. At least I'll try to get through mine and let Mindy and Chris take you through the rest of the presentation. So quick expectations as to what we are hoping to learn from this session. Why and what are we seeing on the AWS side when it comes to education as a vertical? So what are some trends that we're seeing? What are some customer stories that we're hearing? So I'll try to give you a high-level view of what's happening. And then the more important and interesting things you'll hear from University of Michigan and Caltech as to how did they go through the journey of deciding to move forward into a cloud environment, how did they go through the adoption process, and what are some lessons that they learned that perhaps will be very beneficial to you guys. You probably got this sense quite a bit throughout this week. Cloud is becoming the new normal, and we're seeing this in the education space as well. Just to give you a data point on that, back in June when I presented at our Worldwide Public Sector Symposium out in DC, we had a number that indicated that we had 4,500 educational institutions around the globe using AWS. Between now and June, or since June, in the last 3 months, that number grew to over 5,000. So the pace is picking up, and we're seeing that curve almost steep. So we're seeing a lot more adoption, a lot more understanding of what cloud is and how AWS can help in an educational environment. The reasons that we hear from customers as to why they are considering AWS, 6 different categories. The first one is time to results. Agility is a different way of saying that. If you have an idea for a project, you want to get going, traditionally there's all this procurement and process that slows things down. With cloud and AWS, literally in a matter of minutes, you can get going and try that idea. If it doesn't work out, you know what? Turn things down, give that capacity back to AWS, and you stop paying for it. So reducing the time to get going and time to results. Second is lowering costs. At one point in the past, lowering costs used to be the primary focus and the driver. Recently, though, agility is becoming more of the driver. So moving to cloud just for cost savings is not anymore the primary driver. And the reason why generally customers are able to lower their costs on AWS is the scale at which we're operating. You heard in one of the keynotes that we're now supporting over 1 million active customers around the globe. So that scale gives us a lot of flexibility when it comes to pricing and being able to control costs and lower prices to our customers as well. Elastic and scalable, I'll combine these two into one. This is basically ability for you to decide mostly in an automated way where you can grow and shrink your environment based on real-time needs, as opposed to working with a static environment that you may have procured a while ago. Global access, especially if you're in higher ed and let's say you have distance learning programs, MOOCs, you have students that are distributed around the globe, global access is absolutely key. We have a number of institutions that run online educational solutions on AWS, and they leverage all of our regions around the globe. Secure is obviously another theme that we constantly hear from customers is because AWS gives you access to a lot of data, auditing exactly at any time with a single API call, you can tell what's in your environment. Very hard to do in a traditional on-prem data center. When it comes to what customers are doing, I'm going to break this down into 3 different categories. Business of education. What I mean by that is systems and solutions that are needed in order to operate the business of education, typically handled by central IT. So if you look at some of these systems, ERP systems, analytic systems, These kinds of solutions are needed to run the business of whatever the business happens to be, whether it's higher education, K-12, or even in the edtech space. We're seeing a number of those, so some of the examples here are listed. Few examples of customers that are leveraging AWS for business solutions. University of Notre Dame, for example, all of their public-facing property, nd.edu, happens to be on AWS. The reason that they've gone through that process and have done that is to deal with high spike in load on a game day. Leading up to a game day and actually on a game day, the traffic surges significantly high, which on a traditional setup is going to create issues. Either you have to over-allocate resources, anticipating that load, which the rest of the time you're underutilizing and therefore losing, or your experience for your end user suffers. University of Maryland University College deployed their analytics solution on AWS, and they're significantly saving. You probably heard earlier today during the education panel that that customer is saving significantly, and at the same time, performance of that analytics solution went up 20-fold. Another example, Ivy Tech Community College deployed a solution in the analytics space, which now they're leveraging a number of AWS services to extend the capability into fraud, early fraud detection, and so on. Once again, saving a lot, while at the same time performance increases significantly. Moving on to more of the online teaching and learning solutions, the primary focus of educational institutions. Some of the solutions that we have seen customers do in this space, whether it's lecture capture and transmitting over the online distance, or learning and management systems. Examples would be Canvas from Instructure runs 100% on AWS, and we have a number of others in that space as well. Distance learning, I said MOOCs, Coursera is one of the prominent examples in that. edX is another one that leverages AWS in order to scale, burst out to real-time demand and then burst or scale back. And then a number of other examples. Virtual desktop is an interesting story where we're seeing a lot of interest in that space because it allows customers to get rid of on-prem labs as well as enable BYOD. So let the student bring whatever device they want to bring, iPad, Kindle, any kind of tablet or laptop, and then connect into and access the environment from anywhere, connect into a Windows 7 desktop that your sysadmins are controlling and managing and provisioning. So we're seeing a lot of interest in that space as well. Some examples here, Coursera, I already went through that, just stat there. Significant growth from day one to end of year one. That would have been impossible to do in a traditional setup. Not only it's technically challenging, but financially extremely challenging as well. Another example, more in the video capture and delivery, Echo 360 runs on AWS. They capture videos of lectures in class and then make them available to students later on for replay and additional viewing as well. In the research space, number of use cases, whether it's high-performance computing, genomics research, and so on. Few examples here, Berkeley deployed, AmpLab deployed an app, once again growing from few users in a test mode to hundreds of thousands of users pretty much overnight, and being able to do that in a highly cost-effective way. Penn State does a lot of genomic analysis leveraging AWS as well, and the examples here are a number. I want to quickly touch on some initiatives in the global impact area, so 3 different categories. We have research grants that we allocate to institutions and researchers. If they're interested in doing innovative work on AWS, we're absolutely willing to step up and help with that effort. We're also hosting a number of public data sets. The more recent ones that come to mind, Landsat, which is global imagery of everything on Earth, is now hosted on AWS. Researchers and institutions can access that free of charge and take advantage of that. Another one would be 3,000 genome rice sequencing. That's a huge data set, once again moved into AWS, and it's made available to anyone that's interested in leveraging that. And then we have a team, we passionately call them PSYCO, scientific computing, but basically they are subject matter experts in the field that happen to be on the AWS team, helping customers get going with research projects and scientific computing projects. Some examples of work that they're doing: square kilometer array out in Australia as well as Africa. They're going through, as you can imagine, a lot of data gets collected. So working with that customer in collecting that data, persisting it, and making it available for researchers in a cost-effective way. One of the ways we're helping enable researchers to move quickly and actually do things in a much more rapid way is peering relationships with large network providers, such as in US, for example, Internet2. We have a peering relationship. So if your institution is connected to I2, you should be able to come to AWS using I2. Similarly, ESNet, which is a Department of Energy research network, we have a peering relationship with them as well. So anyone that's in the research space that want to leverage that ESNet connectivity can come in as well. As well as we have a couple of others that are international, RNet, which is more in the Australia research section. Last trend that we're seeing here are universities that have gone through the various stages of proof of concepts, evaluations, analysis, and then finally deciding that after they've gone through all of that, done their TCO studies, looked at every possible angle, and have decided to go all in. Some examples here: University of Arizona, University of Notre Dame, and Harvard have decided publicly and come out publicly and stated that they're in the process of going all in into AWS. The last topic I will touch on before handing it over is AWS Educate. Most of you probably already know what this is. This is Amazon's global initiative to enable students and professors to get more of cloud curriculum and cloud content into the teaching process. It's beneficial in multiple ways. One, it helps students get the skills that they need so that when they graduate, they're ready to go into workforce. As well as at the same time, enabling by, for example, the 4 components that make up Educate: free credits to professors and students so that they don't have to worry about paying for things as long as they're within the limits. A number of labs and training options made available to customers, made available to students and professors. Content that researchers are able to change and collaborate and exchange. So a professor, for example, in a university, an esteemed university, may have content that he or she has already put together. Why not make it available to other educators around the globe? So that process is enabling professors to take advantage of each other's content. And the last one, it's the community of best practices. So being able to share what's working, what's not working, even outside of AWS context. So take a look at this program, and if you're interested, certainly go to that URL and read up and apply. So with that, I will turn it over to Mindy and Chris to come up here and talk a little bit about the journey that you, Mish, went through.
Thank you. So good afternoon. My name is Chris Wood. I'm Assistant Director within our Information Technology Services organization. And with me is Mandy Chapman, who's our Senior Business Systems Analyst, focused on cloud. You're going to hear 2 different perspectives today from the University of Michigan versus Caltech. The University of Michigan being a very decentralized university, the story you're going to hear us focus on today is about how we're helping our campus quickly adopt cloud services and the value that we might be able to add, versus I think Caltech is going to be more focused on their own internal adoption of cloud services. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mandy.
Cool. All right, so I think it's important to set some of the context as to how diverse the University of Michigan really is. So we have 19 schools and colleges, 22 non-academic units. Each of those schools and colleges and non-academic units have their own budget. They can spend it on IT how they see fit. We have a very large faculty staff base. It equals our student body. We're also a large research expenditure, ranked 2nd nationally. We spend about $1.3 billion a year on research. The other thing is we're not just a university, we're also a teaching and research hospital. So there's a lot of things that we have that we're supporting at the University of Michigan, and trying to take that into consideration when we think, how can we help the university adopt cloud services? So one of the things that we talk about, and Chris alluded to, is that there's 2 roles that our organization plays, right? So the first role is that we're a cloud service provider, right? So we're the central IT organization. We provide services from infrastructure all the way up the stack. So we are trying to promote cloud adoption through the campus, and that's a lot of what you're going to see. Additionally, we're a cloud service adapter, right? So we all know the whole walk the walk, eat the dog food type of thing. So as we're going through, we realize that we need to also adapt cloud services so we can be the go-to experts on campus when it comes to how to use these services. So what is the dream of the future, right? So how can we help campus adapt cloud services, and what does that mean? So we know that we want to enable campus to focus on the mission of their business through the use of cloud services. Cloud adoption really is the key pathway to reaching this vision.
So what's our strategy? So again, our focus is on how we're helping to support campus in adopting cloud services. So our strategy is anchored on 4 pillars, and I guess I'll start off with a note that these 4 pillars are not a maturity model, and not all pillars are going to be required for cloud services. So we'll be doing an evaluation of cloud service providers as we bring it into our service portfolio and determine which pillars are appropriate for each cloud service provider. So the first pillar that I want to talk about is enable. We want to enable campus and our schools and colleges to quickly adopt cloud services. Through that, we want to provide things like contracts, university billing. We also want to help by developing user groups, communities of practice, and some educational materials for them. The second pillar is integrate. So we want to integrate cloud service provider and cloud solutions with our on-premise services and solutions. So laying out our foundational infrastructure and connecting that to our cloud services. The third pillar would be consult. So we want to help our campus and schools and colleges build solutions. We want to, again, allow them to focus on the mission of their business. We don't expect them or want them to necessarily be experts in every single cloud solution, and so we want to help them build solutions using the cloud service providers. Things like leveraging our in-depth specialized knowledge in key cloud providers, and help them build solutions through best practices, doing financial assessment of going from typical capital expenditures to operating expense, as well as helping to migrate and implement into the cloud. Fifth pillar would be administer. So after we help build these solutions with campus, we wanted to, again, look to allow schools and colleges to focus on the mission of their business. And through that, we're going to look to help them administer in an ongoing fashion cloud solutions. So what are some barriers to implementing your strategy? Some of you may have heard culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it was important for us to look at our cultural lenses across our campus, and we've identified 3 key ones that we focus on. So the first one is leadership. Looking at leadership, is your central IT driving your leadership? If so, it's important to articulate your value proposition of moving to the cloud through things like cost, flexibility, scale. Are we faster to innovate by adopting cloud services? If you're fortunate enough, like we are, to have leadership, full leadership support, you'll be in a position where leadership is actually driving your central IT. In that scenario, it's important for us to understand what the drivers are for leadership in moving to the cloud. Is it security and compliance? We all know that vulnerabilities and risk management is ever growing across our institutions. So that may be a driver. Perhaps it's internal political drivers or institutional reputation. Second lens is campus. So is your central IT driving cloud adoption across campus? If so, it's important to understand what our campus constraints are. Do we have budget and funding model issues? Again, in the shift from capital expense to operating expense. Are there staff resource issues? We know a lot of schools and colleges like to leverage grad students and others who kind of rotate in and out. And so are there resource constraints? Or is there a trust and security issue in moving to the cloud, or a perception of it? Is campus driving central IT? That would be the scenario at our university. And so it's important for us to understand the drivers there as well. Our goal is to enable, not obstruct. And so it's important for us to understand the need and the speed that campus requires and demands to be able to innovate quickly in the cloud. And we, as a central IT organization, like to operate or have traditionally operated in that mode 1 enterprise support model, and we recognize that's not flexible enough to adapt the fast needs across campus. So shifting more towards a mode 2 operation is important for us. And the third lens is our IT staff. So is central IT staff, or is central IT driving our IT staff for cloud adoption? If so, it's important for us to understand our IT staff perspective. Staff obviously some staff have concerns about job security and moving to the cloud. We know that our IT staff like to have control of equipment, and so shifting to the cloud is somewhat of a job security or job threat to them. There's also skill set gaps. Obviously, innovation and cloud service providers are rapidly changing and coming onto the market, and so keeping up with those skills have not been the top priority for some of our IT staff. Conversely, if it's IT staff driving central IT, it's important to understand the consequences. Central IT, can be perceived as slow to change, and as a result, you run the risk of losing good IT talent.
So I think when we look at those 3 lenses, they also apply when it comes to education, right? So we want to be able to help campus adopt cloud services, and what do we need from an education perspective? So again, those same 3 lenses, thinking about that leadership, your campus, and then your IT staff. So what does the leadership really need? They need that elevator speech. You need to give them the 30-second why cloud adoption is important. What does it mean to the university? What does it mean to their staff? And then they need to be able to spread that same message to other leadership on campus. Again, going back to our very diverse model, 19 schools and colleges, 22 non-academic units. We have a lot of leaders on campus. So being able to share that story is really important. And then what does campus need? So what do we need to do for campus to help them get on board and get up to speed? Well, we want to develop training programs for campus. We don't want them going out there and trying to figure out what do they need, right? So we want to be the leaders and help develop training programs for campus to understand what cloud adoption looks like and what does that mean for their individual business. And then staff, right? So we talked about the job security, the skill set. You need to assess what your current skills are within the IT staff. Look to see what the gaps are. And then look for hidden talent. Do you have a cloud ninja? I heard that ninja this morning. I'm like, that's a really great analogy. Are there people out there that have these secret skills that you just don't know about? And then retooling and training in these services, investing in your staff so they can be, the support model for cloud adoption. So, how do you organize yourself to support your strategy? Order matters, right? So a lot of times when people start talking about cloud strategy and cloud adoption, they go right to staffing. They want to get right into the weeds and figure out, what do I need to do for my staff? You really need to take that step back and say, let's think about our strategy. Let's develop our cloud adoption strategy first, and then it'll align you next to do your structure, right? So evaluate what your current structure looks like. Are you guys siloed? DevOps? Do you have a shared model? Is your team unified, or is it technology domained? And then once you have that understanding, then you can look at what your staff needs really are. Do you need to adjust your staff? Do we need to hire architects? Again, going back to the education, do we need to create cloud administrators? This is really a key element when it comes to thinking about the strategy structure staff.
So what are the considerations with respect to choosing technology or a cloud service provider? We want to focus on a few select cloud providers with proven track records and develop deep expertise and skills to help support our campus. We want to leverage industry advisors, obviously the Magic Quadrant and others, to help guide us in which technology providers we want to offer to campus. So what are some of the recommendations? It's never too late to set your strategy. You can't make up in tactics that which you lack in strategy. Consider your culture. Culture each strategy for breakfast. Know your cultural lenses and make sure you have a good understanding of them and a plan of action. Cost isn't everything. Obviously, cloud technology service provider costs are rapidly changing, making it, while an upfront initial investment in infrastructure on premises may be cheaper at first, 2 months down the road, a cloud service provider may be cheaper at that point. Just look at Amazon S3 prices over the past 2 years. Invest in educating your staff and be deliberate. Have dedicated resources. Don't try to do this on the margin. You want to set yourself up to succeed. Having dedicated, focused resources is an important factor for that. And of course, you want to understand your financial model and the impacts of moving to the cloud. The shift from capital expense to operating expense is an important consideration in the budget and planning process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris from Caltech.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. So my name is Chris Malik. I am the Manager of Academic Development Services at Caltech. My talk is going to be a little different than that of my colleagues from Michigan for a number of obvious reasons, but the main one is that I am an implementer. We've been in the cloud since 2010. That's when we started migrating our services. So what I'm going to talk about today is what our implementation strategy was and what enabled that to work and what lessons I learned from that. So, as I said, I'm from the California Institute of Technology. We're located in beautiful Pasadena, California. That's a picture of our campus with the San Gabriel Mountains in the background. We're a top-tier university. A lot of people on the East Coast may not know much about Caltech, so I have to say that. We've been ranked #1 in the Times Higher Education World Rankings for the last 5 years, and we're in the top 10 in all other major rankings. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because I'm setting you up for some context for the kind of environment we work in. We have some very high-achieving faculty, students and staff, and they have high demands on what they expect from their IT service team. We're small, 6,400 people total. I'd like to point, that's about 4 to 10 times smaller than the rest of our peers, and I'd like to point out that that's 1,300 people fewer than Michigan has faculty. We have 1,000 undergrads, 1,200 graduate students, 300 faculty, and 3,900 staff. That's a 3-to-1 undergrad faculty ratio. That's the best in the country. Other things about Caltech, we founded JPL back in the 30s, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. You may know the little robots that we have on Mars now. We've run it since 1958. As I said, I'm the Manager of Academic Development Services. I work as part of IMSS, the central IT organization. Unlike UMich, we are a heavily centralized university. We're not really big enough to have independent IT organizations out among our schools. It was not always like that, but we've had a centralization move over the last 10 years. IMSS has about 100 people in it. My team is lean. We have 6 people, my director, Glenn Bach, me, and 4 of my excellent developers. We have 35 years of collective systems administration experience between us and more than 50 of development experience. This is going to be important for my implementation rollout explanation. My job there is to enable research and instruction through software, whether that means writing custom software or finding cloud solutions that are more appropriate than what I can provide. We currently run websites and web applications and APIs at Caltech. We have about 130 of them, including the main campus website. 5 of the 6 divisions, what we call our schools, we have 6 academic divisions. So we run 5 of their websites and the campus intranet portal. Just like Caltech is smaller than their peers, we in academic development services are much smaller than our peers, our counterparts at peer institutions. We're about 4 to 6 times smaller with all the commensurate side effects from that. So we're a small school, but we have big needs. Like I said, I have very high achieving faculty that talk to us frequently about all the different services that they want. But we have fewer people and resources than our peers do. We have less money and we just have less time to work on things. But we have the same needs as our peers. And when we've gone out shopping to vendors to see if they could help us, frequently they're out of our price range, or they're simply sized too big for our school. And in the past, this has caused this lack of resources and available vendor support has caused Caltech to appear behind our peers, both internally and externally, and that makes us very sad. So I want to set the stage for our cloud when we started adopting the cloud in 2010. It was, I like to call it engineering an environment of scarcity. So our small scale meant that we couldn't buy a lot of hardware or software frequently. So what frequently happened is we would save up our money, buy something, and keep it for a long time. A lot of times that meant do it yourself or don't do it at all, right? And we spent a lot of time maintaining low-level services, so storage systems, backups, firewalls, network, things like that. That made it difficult to deploy new services or update existing services. We had to find people time and get our operations people away from the fires that they have to put out and the infrastructure they have to maintain. We had to carefully plan out what buys we were going to do. We had to share resources with the other projects that were going on and try to allocate sufficient resources in advance. And this made it difficult to roll out the new services. And really, my goal is always, I want to solve our business customers' problems. And a lot of our time in setting up projects was not about writing software to solve their business problems, but in doing other things. So this is 2010. The background for what it looked like for cloud adoption then was our upper management was very pro-cloud. We had some issues on campus. Again, we're a small school and we have a small land footprint. Back in 2010, our main machine room was 94% full, and we had power cooling problems that we were achieving capacity. There were not a lot of other places on campus to put new machine rooms, so our upper management from the VP of Business and Finance and our CIO really were very interested in moving to the cloud to alleviate some of these capacity problems and also to drive our costs down. Operations and information security were not pro-cloud back then. There was a lot of uneasiness about moving to the cloud. Our operations folk were very busy maintaining the infrastructure, and our information security people were worried about data compromises and what's going to happen if we put our authentication databases out there or some of our private data. So the main concerns were what happened. The operations people would say, what's going to happen to my management processes? I can't use the same management process on-prem and in the cloud, so there's going to be a big learning curve for us, and it's going to take time away from the things that we already have to do. Our CIO made a decision that my team should lead the cloud push. We elected to do a DevOps model. Our unique experience on my team allowed that to happen. And we chose services that had no private data so that information security would be okay with that. And this is, I use what we call the Field of Dreams model. We do this a lot at Caltech. Choose something easy to put out there and do it, and then people will see it and see that their fears may not have been as big as they thought they would be. So I want to talk about my implementation timeline from 2010 to the present. This was a very intentional timeline. We chose our services very carefully. And there were two things I was trying to manage here. One was we had to learn how to use the cloud and how to architect applications to go there. So we needed our time to ramp up and learn our best practices. But the other thing that was very important was establishing trust among our peers and our customers. We started building out our infrastructure in 2010, but the first thing we rolled out was our own website. We like to eat our own dog food. So the IMSS website went out into the cloud in March 2011. This was an important step. It's an important website, so a lot of people use it, but it's not critical to operations, and it doesn't have a lot of stakeholders. So we could decide to do that and just go ahead with it. This is where we learned our first prototype of how to set websites out into the cloud, and there was a lot of things we had to learn. That set us up for the secret campus website upgrade. So a month later, we had been working on them simultaneously. That's why we could do them together. But we used what we learned in rolling out our department website to roll out secretly the campus website. The only people that knew that it was going on was our customers and us. And we didn't tell the campus. It looked exactly the same, but this was about building trust with our customer, marketing and communications, who's a big customer of ours. And we were helping them with some very bad problems with our existing website, which was running on 10-year-old hardware at that time, which was rapidly dying. We were also, I'm told, the first among our peers to launch a website into their main campus website in the cloud, so that made our CIO very happy. Marketing and communications was very happy with what happened with the secret upgrade, and so over the next year, we did a major refresh of the main Caltech website, and we noticed that this is a different model. We added a bunch of new technologies now that we were comfortable with how we were rolling things out. And this was also very public. This was announced that we were putting this into the cloud. So now the entire campus and the rest of our peers could see this. And this went very well. Marketing and communications now had a lot of trust in us, and they were very happy to evangelize for us. So they went around to the different schools and to undergraduate admissions and said, you know what, you guys should work with Chris's team and get your sites refreshed and out in the cloud like that. We've had a great experience. And again, we used exactly, again, here I'm using the same implementation. I learned it before, now I'm going to use it again to make it easy. We did a few extra things, like we rolled out some APIs and stuff, but mostly it was the same. So that brings us to the present. I've got a bunch of websites, a bunch of important websites out there. Now we're ready to tackle the hard stuff. So I'm currently in the process of moving our intranet portal to the cloud. This is a big distributed system, about 40, 60 machines. We're setting up our VPC with a tunnel to campus, planning on leveraging Docker and ECS to do things. And importantly, our information security people have gotten very comfortable with cloud services, and they're allowing us to move our authentication databases out there at least, that was a big win. We're also moving, we have a CMS solution that hosts a bunch of websites on campus. We're going to move that to the cloud, about 100 sites. I want to talk a little bit about what I think we gained by doing this. The first thing is what Sri was talking about earlier, agility. In the old days, we were not agile. It was hard to change our processes and adopt new technologies. It was hard enough that often we would think it was not worth the expenditure of effort. But with Amazon's utility pricing, their programmable infrastructure, and their nearly infinite capacity, it has really lowered my cost to try new things out. Again, like Sri was saying before, I can spin up our entire architecture of 10, 15 systems, run it for a day, and it only costs us a few tens of dollars. This is extremely powerful for me. It allows me to adapt new technologies quickly and to really fine-tune my processes. I'm a lean team, so I cannot afford to spend a lot of time in busy work or in things that are not directly helping my customers. So Amazon has allowed us to really cut down on the time we spend managing infrastructure and deployments and stuff. It's also very easy to clone environments. I don't know if anyone's talked about that. You have a structure for building your production environment. It's very easy to make an exact clone of it to test for doing QA or for doing testing of new code. And it's a big enabler for DevOps. It's really helped us become more of a coherent team. Amazon's new capabilities have also really changed the way we do things. Amazon services are things that are either impossible to do ourselves or will be very costly, and I just list a few of them. Multi-availability zones, I can be geographically redundant for the first time. Load balancers whenever I want them. S3 is part of everything that we do, and so on and so on. What's important to me is that I get to focus on my value to the Institute. The value I see is helping people solve their business problems. The more time I can spend actually working on their problem instead of the things that are dependent on my solution, then the more value I add to the university and the happier my customers are. So what is it like now? So we've been there for 5 years. I have about 90 instances in my part of the cloud. Upper management still very pro-cloud, in fact, more pro-cloud even than they were in 2010, and are pushing us to move ever more services out there. Operations is very pro-cloud now. They've long since gotten over their reticence and have done some very interesting things of their own in the cloud. One thing I would want to briefly talk about is our Professor Gutman, who's a genomics researcher at Caltech. There was a really interesting project that they did. They moved their entire HPC cluster, a big development environment, a ton of data, and all their workstations out into the cloud. They're using AWS workspaces to supply workstations inside, and now, Professor Gutman loves that, and he has now been an advocate and an evangelist for the operations team, and we have more customers lining up to go out there. So the Field of Dreams model seems to have worked for us. I want to talk a bit about what I learned. Upper management support could not have been more critical. Since we had that from the beginning, it really smoothed out a lot of the political issues that we would have had and a lot of the decision making. Customer support and trust was also tremendously critical. The fact that we had customers that would go evangelize for us and change people's minds without even our having to do anything, it was extremely valuable. And one thing I'm going to say is where our small size in the past hurt us, now it helps us. I hear a lot of my larger peers talk about largely political problems that they have to deal with or cultural problems. We don't really have to deal with that. There's really 2 people on our team, our cloud team, and I asked Glenn, you think this is a good idea? I'm like, yeah, and so then we just go do it. Our team's expertise helped. The fact that we have both a lot of development experience and a lot of systems administration experience meant we could build our applications knowing how the systems worked and taking advantage of AWS products. Now, I hope what you got from my timeline was that it's very important, I think, to take baby steps. Choose services that don't have a lot of dependencies and also don't have a lot of stakeholders that can get mad at you to start with, and build up bit by bit. There's a steep learning curve. You have to give yourself time to do that. And you also have to dedicate people to do that. This is what Mandy and Chris were saying also. One thing I'm going to say is expect to do it wrong. You're going to do it wrong the first several times. And in fact, you're never really going to do it right because Amazon changes so fast that you're going to just get things rolled out and then they're going to come out with ECS and you're going to go, I'm doing it all wrong now. Finally, be prepared to change the way you do things. Don't think you can just take your on-prem service and move it verbatim into the cloud. You can do that, but you're not going to see any of the scaling or cost savings, the scalability or cost savings if you do that. And that's the end.